What if the woman you trust is slowly pulling away, but every time you question it, somehow you become the problem? The words sound innocent, but the pattern behind them can reveal something much deeper. Before you accuse her or blame yourself, learn the 4 statements that could expose emotional distance, manipulation, and hidden betrayal. Because sometimes her actions are telling you the truth long before her words ever will. Have you ever noticed her becoming distant, but whenever you try to talk about it, somehow you end up questioning yourself instead of her behavior? You ask what changed, and suddenly, you're the insecure one. You ask why she's acting differently, and you're accused of being controlling. You try to get closer, and she tells you she simply needs space. Sometimes these things really do have innocent explanations. People get stressed. Relationships go through difficult periods. But when the same excuses keep appearing while her behavior changes in other areas, you need to stop listening only to what she's saying and start paying attention to what she's actually doing. Because betrayal rarely begins with the affair itself. Long before another person enters the picture physically, emotional distance often appears first. The conversations change, affection fades, privacy increases, and explanations begin appearing that sound reasonable enough to keep you from asking deeper questions. In this video, we're going to break down 4 statements that can sometimes signal that something deeper is happening in a relationship. None of these statements automatically mean someone is cheating. That's important. But when they repeatedly appear alongside secrecy, emotional withdrawal, and major changes in behavior, they deserve your attention. And the most important lesson is simple. Don't become obsessed with proving anything. Watch the pattern. Let's start with the first one. I just haven't been in the mood lately. At face value, this sounds completely believable. Everyone gets exhausted. Work becomes overwhelming. Stress builds. Sleep gets disrupted. Health changes. Life can drain a person's desire for affection, and sometimes someone genuinely doesn't feel like being intimate. So if she says this once, don't immediately assume the worst. The problem begins when it becomes a long-term pattern and the withdrawal seems to exist specifically inside the relationship. Maybe she no longer reaches for your hand. She stops initiating affection. She avoids cuddling. She seems uncomfortable when you try to get close. Weeks go by, then months, and the emotional warmth between you continues disappearing. Meanwhile, something strange happens. She suddenly has plenty of energy for everything else. She's spending more time getting ready. She's changing her wardrobe. She's suddenly much more interested in fitness. She's paying greater attention to her appearance. She's taking more pictures. She's becoming more socially active. She seems energized when she's around other people, yet exhausted whenever you're the one asking for closeness. That contrast is what matters. It's not simply that she's less interested in intimacy. It's that her energy and excitement may have shifted somewhere else. Imagine a man named David. He's been with his partner for several years, and gradually she becomes physically distant. Whenever he tries to talk about it, she tells him she's exhausted from work. He believes her. Why wouldn't he? Work really can be stressful. But then he notices that she's waking up early every morning to exercise. She's buying new clothes, spending longer getting ready, experimenting with different looks, and becoming increasingly active on social media. Yet when David reaches for her hand, she pulls away. When he wants to cuddle, she's tired. When he wants to spend time together, she suddenly needs space. That's when the question changes. It's no longer simply, why doesn't she feel like being intimate? It's, why does she seem energized everywhere except when she's with me? That distinction matters. Again, this doesn't prove infidelity. A person can lose desire because of stress, depression, exhaustion, medication, hormonal changes, relationship problems, or countless other reasons. But you should pay attention when emotional and physical withdrawal from you happens at the same time as increased effort toward her appearance, social life, or attention from other people. Don't accuse her. Don't beg for affection. Don't start competing with imaginary men. And don't convince yourself that becoming endlessly accommodating will automatically restore attraction. Instead, observe. Is she still trying to maintain emotional closeness in other ways? Does she still want to spend time with you? Does she care about reconnecting? Does she communicate openly about what's happening? Or has every form of intimacy disappeared while her excitement for the rest of her life continues increasing? That's the pattern you need to understand. The second statement is, I just want to focus on myself right now. This one is much harder to question because it sounds healthy. Personal growth is good. Therapy can be good. Developing independence is good. Learning about yourself is good. So when your partner says she needs to focus on herself, your first instinct may be to support her. And you should. But there's a difference between healthy independence and using personal growth as a reason to emotionally remove yourself from the relationship. When someone is genuinely growing while remaining committed to their relationship, that growth doesn't necessarily require their partner to disappear. They might learn something about themselves and want to discuss it with you. They might discover a new perspective and explain how it affects the relationship. They might become more aware of their boundaries and communicate those boundaries clearly. Healthy growth can create more understanding. But sometimes I need to focus on myself becomes a wall. Suddenly, you're excluded from everything. She doesn't want to discuss what she's experiencing. She doesn't want you involved. Your questions are interpreted as pressure. Your desire for connection becomes neediness. Your attempts to understand become controlling. And eventually, you begin feeling like your existence inside the relationship is interfering with her personal development. That's where you need to pay attention. Consider another example. A man named Chris supports his partner when she starts talking about healing, personal development, and finding herself. He encourages her. He even supports the activities and workshops she's interested in. At first, everything seems positive. But gradually, her new journey becomes completely separate from him. She starts going away more frequently. She develops new social circles. She spends more time with people he has never met. She becomes increasingly private about what she's doing. Whenever he asks questions, she tells him that he needs to respect her journey. Eventually, he begins feeling guilty simply for wanting to remain connected to the woman he's in a relationship with. That's the danger. The language sounds mature, but the behavior can still create distance. Real self-development doesn't automatically mean abandoning your partner. A healthy relationship can contain two individuals who continue becoming better versions of themselves while still choosing each other. So don't judge the words. Look at the effect. Is her personal growth creating healthier communication between you? Or is it creating a larger and larger space between you? Does she want to share what she's discovering? Or does she insist that you must stay outside of that part of her life? Is she becoming more emotionally available? Or increasingly unavailable? Those answers tell you much more than the phrase, "I need to focus on myself." And be careful about one thing. Don't make the mistake of believing every woman who asks for space is preparing to leave. Sometimes people genuinely need time alone. Sometimes personal development requires independence. The warning sign is the pattern, especially when self-growth repeatedly becomes an excuse for emotional separation, secrecy, or avoiding conversations about the relationship. The third statement is, you're being too controlling. This is where many men immediately become confused. You ask a question. Instead of receiving an answer, you receive an accusation. Why were you out so late? Who were you talking to? Who's this person you've suddenly been spending so much time with? And instead of addressing the question, the conversation becomes about your personality. You're insecure. You're jealous. You're controlling. You're toxic. You're told that you don't trust her. Suddenly, you aren't discussing what happened anymore. You're defending your character. Now let's be fair, there are genuinely controlling behaviors that should not be defended. Demanding passwords, tracking someone's location without consent, monitoring every friendship, restricting who they can see, or constantly interrogating them isn't healthy relationship behavior. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about reasonable questions inside a relationship where circumstances have genuinely changed. There's a difference between controlling someone and asking for clarity. A healthy relationship doesn't require you to be afraid of asking simple questions. If something changes, partners should be able to discuss it. And when someone has nothing to hide, an ordinary question doesn't necessarily need to become a battle. But when every reasonable question turns into an attack against you, you need to notice the pattern. Consider a man named Mark. He notices that his partner has started keeping her phone turned away. She's receiving messages late at night, and she's becoming protective of her screen. He doesn't accuse her of anything. He simply asks who is messaging her. Instead of answering, she becomes furious. She tells him he's possessive. She says she can't breathe around him. She calls him insecure. Within minutes, Mark is apologizing. Think about what just happened. The original question disappeared. Instead of discussing the behavior that caused the question, the entire conversation became about whether Mark was a bad partner for asking. That is deflection. And deflection can be extremely powerful because it teaches you to distrust your own instincts. Eventually, you stop asking. You think, maybe I really am insecure. Maybe I should just trust her. Maybe asking questions makes me controlling. And now the problem isn't simply that you're confused. You've been trained to silence yourself. That's why you need to evaluate your own behavior honestly. Were you making an unreasonable demand? Or were you asking something any committed partner might reasonably ask? If your behavior is genuinely controlling, own it. But if you're simply asking for basic clarity and the response is consistently an attack on your character, don't automatically accept the label. You don't have to prove she's cheating. You don't even need to accuse her. Simply recognize that healthy communication requires two people who can discuss uncomfortable subjects without immediately turning one person into the villain. The fourth statement is, I just want us to be completely honest with each other. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Most people want honesty from their partner. You hear that sentence and think, finally, maybe we're going to start communicating properly. But honesty only works when it goes in both directions, and that's where selective honesty becomes dangerous. Selective honesty means someone is willing to learn everything about you while carefully controlling what you learn about them. She wants to know about your childhood, your insecurities, your past relationships, your regrets, your biggest fears, your mistakes, your emotional wounds. And because you believe this is creating deeper intimacy, you open up, you become vulnerable, you give her information that could take years to earn from another person. But then you ask questions about her current behavior, and suddenly the rules change. You ask about the new coworker. You ask why she has become distant. You ask why she's suddenly protecting her phone. You ask where she was. And suddenly you're accused of not trusting her. That's not mutual transparency. That's an imbalance. Imagine a man named Tom. His partner is fascinated by his past. She wants to know everything about his previous relationships, his regrets, his childhood experiences, and the things he's most insecure about. Tom shares because he believes vulnerability creates intimacy. But when he asks simple questions about her current life, she becomes defensive. She gives vague answers. She changes the subject. She tells him he's suspicious. She says he should trust her. And Tom begins wondering whether he's asking for too much. This is where you need to understand the difference between vulnerability and transparency. Vulnerability is about opening your emotional world. Transparency is about being reasonably open about the reality of your relationship. One doesn't replace the other. Someone can tell you their deepest childhood trauma while still hiding what they're doing today. That's why you shouldn't measure honesty by how emotional the conversation feels. Measure it by whether the truth flows both ways. Does she expect openness from you while resisting reasonable openness herself? Does she share information that makes her look good but become evasive when questions involve her current behavior? Does she demand trust while simultaneously creating circumstances that make trust difficult? If so, the issue isn't necessarily that she's cheating. The issue is that the relationship has become confusing and one-sided. Real honesty shouldn't feel like you're begging for information. It shouldn't leave you feeling guilty for wanting clarity. And it shouldn't mean that one person knows everything while the other person carefully controls what gets revealed. Mutual transparency creates security. Selective transparency creates confusion. And now we reach the most important part. What should you actually do when you notice these patterns? This is where many men make the biggest mistake. They become detectives. They argue over every detail. They demand explanations. They start checking everything. They chase reassurance. They repeatedly confront their partner. And eventually, the relationship becomes a courtroom where every conversation is an investigation. Don't do that. Don't turn yourself into a detective. Don't spend every night trying to prove a theory. Instead, step back and observe. When she says, "I'm just not in the mood," don't argue about whether she's telling the truth. Watch the overall pattern. Is she still affectionate in other ways? Does she still want quality time? Does she still seek emotional closeness? Or is she withdrawing from you while becoming increasingly energized and invested everywhere else? When she says, "I need to focus on myself," don't demand to be included in every part of her life. Observe what that independence actually looks like. Is she becoming healthier and more emotionally balanced while still respecting the relationship? Or is finding herself gradually becoming a reason to exclude you, avoid communication, and create emotional distance? When she says you're controlling, examine yourself honestly. Were you actually behaving in a controlling way? If so, correct it. But if you asked a normal question and immediately received a character attack instead of an answer, pay attention to that response. And when she says she wants complete honesty, don't become distracted by the beautiful words. Watch whether honesty is mutual. Does she give you the same transparency she expects from you? Or are you constantly explaining yourself while she remains difficult to understand? This is how you protect yourself, not through accusations, not through begging, not through revenge, not through trying to force someone to confess. You protect yourself by becoming a better observer. Because actions reveal patterns that words can hide. And there's something else you shouldn't ignore: your intuition. Your intuition isn't magic. It's often your mind noticing tiny inconsistencies before you've consciously put them together. A different tone, a change in affection, a new level of secrecy, different routines, less interest in you, more attention towards someone else. Small changes that seem insignificant individually can become meaningful when they form a consistent pattern. So if everything she says sounds perfectly logical, but something about the relationship continuously feels wrong, don't immediately dismiss yourself. Investigate your own feelings calmly. Ask what specifically changed. Ask whether you have evidence or simply fear. Ask whether your concern comes from previous experiences or from something happening right now. And most importantly, don't confuse intuition with certainty. Your gut can tell you that something deserves attention. It cannot automatically tell you exactly what that something is. That's why observation matters. You don't need to accuse someone of betrayal simply because they're distant. You need to recognize when the relationship no longer feels honest, safe, or mutual. The 4 statements we've discussed are not automatic proof of cheating. I haven't been in the mood. I need to focus on myself. You're being controlling. I want us to be honest. Any one of these can be completely genuine. The problem is what happens around them. Does affection disappear while excitement for everyone else increases? Does personal growth become an excuse for excluding you? Do normal questions consistently turn into attacks? Does she demand honesty from you while remaining evasive about herself? That's where the pattern becomes important. And if there's one thing you should take away from this entire conversation, it's this. You should never have to become a detective just to feel secure in your own relationship. You shouldn't have to beg someone to communicate. You shouldn't have to apologize for having reasonable emotional needs. You shouldn't have to convince yourself that confusion is normal simply because someone keeps giving you explanations that sound logical. At the same time, don't become paranoid. Don't assume betrayal because your partner has one bad week. Don't treat every request for space as evidence of infidelity. Don't turn normal relationship problems into accusations. Instead, stay grounded. Look at consistency. Look at behavior. Look at whether both people are contributing to trust. A healthy relationship doesn't require perfection, but it does require reciprocity. You should be able to ask difficult questions. You should be able to discuss changes. You should be able to express concern without immediately being punished for having feelings. And if someone repeatedly makes you feel that your only options are to stay silent or become the villain, something is wrong with the communication dynamic, whether cheating is involved or not. Your power isn't in winning an argument. It isn't in forcing a confession. It isn't in begging someone to choose you. Your power is in being willing to see reality clearly. If her words and actions don't match, don't ignore the actions. If the relationship repeatedly leaves you confused, don't spend years trying to rationalize the confusion. Step back, observe, communicate clearly, set your standards, and if the relationship continues to violate those standards, be willing to make a decision that protects your peace and self-respect. You don't need to destroy someone to walk away. You don't need revenge. You don't need to expose every secret. Sometimes the strongest response is simply accepting what the pattern has shown you and refusing to remain somewhere that continually makes you question your own worth. The right relationship shouldn't require constant detective work. It won't make honesty feel like a treasure you have to hunt for. It won't make closeness feel like something you're begging to receive. It won't require you to silence every instinct just to keep the peace. Love can be complicated, but it shouldn't constantly leave you trapped in confusion. So pay attention, not to one sentence, not to one bad day, not to one argument. Watch the pattern, because words can be carefully chosen. Actions are much harder to maintain forever. And when the two stop matching, that's when you need to stop arguing with reality and start listening to what you're actually seeing. If this video helped you recognize something you've been struggling to understand, don't keep that realization to yourself. Like the video so it can reach someone else who may need to hear it. Subscribe to Female Mind Decode for more conversations about relationships, emotional behavior, attraction, trust, and the patterns people often overlook. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from or what relationship lesson you've learned the hard way. Most importantly, remember this. You don't need to live in suspicion. You don't need to live in denial either. Stay calm. Stay observant. Trust yourself enough to investigate what you feel, but stay rational enough to separate evidence from fear. And never allow someone to convince you that constant confusion is what love is supposed to feel like. Don't let confusion become your normal. Watch the patterns, trust your instincts, and judge actions more than carefully chosen words. You don't need to chase, accuse, or beg for the truth. Sometimes, stepping back is enough to finally see what was right in front of you.